All right, welcome everybody to the Friends of the Cabildo Member Lecture Series. If this is your first time on here, welcome. This is included with your membership. We have about 20 to 25 throughout the year, and they're always on Tuesday nights. And we've got a really interesting topic that we're going to be talking about tonight. But I want to update you on a couple of things that we have going on at the Friends. Um, if you haven't seen yet, we have our Research in Your New Orleans Property with Robbie Cangelosi, which is next Saturday, the 20, 28th, at the Jazz Museum. But we also have a Zoom option as well if you'd like to participate that way. It's a great lecture to learning how to learn more about your house and a lot of ways, very simple ways to learn about what happened in your house in the past. And it can apply to different parts of specifically Louisiana, but the way you do learn, you can also do a lot of the same stuff through researching your property wherever it is, just with the tips that you learned through Robbie. So I hope you take advantage of that on the 28th, and that's at 10 o'clock in the morning. Also, a reminder, um, August is Museum Month. July and August are officially our biggest months for memberships with the Friends of the Cabildo. You get to go into over 20 museums, including the Ogden, Backstreet Cultural Museum, multiple of other museums, and you get to bring a guest. If you just have a regular membership with the Friends of the Cabildo, you can go through the entire month, and you can go to all these other museums as well, NOMA. And so I hope you take advantage of that. If your membership is lapsed, please let us know. We'd be happy to renew your membership and get you in there so that you can go in the month of August, go in some cool areas and go check out some different museums as well. But I also just want to add on that the State Museum has multiple new exhibits. There's the Lafayette exhibit. There's the Rodrigue exhibit on the third floor. Those are in the Cabildo. The Jazz Museum has a new exhibit. And there'll be an upcoming new update to the Katrina exhibit, as well as the new carnival exhibit that came out in May. Women pioneers of Mardi Gras. So I hope you take advantage of all of those things that are included in your membership, and you take advantage of those other museums as well. But tonight, I'm very excited. We formed a Creole history committee a couple of years ago, and we're seeing the fruits of their labor. And they're now presenting. They've done a lot of great research. Excuse me. And so we're going to have the next 2 weeks. We're going to have two of the members. Next week, Harold Marchand's going to be talking about the lives of free people of color during the antebellum period. But tonight, we're going to have the chairperson of the Creole History Committee for the Friends of the Cabildo, Miss Dionne Butler, who is a current tour guide, a board member with the Friends of the Cabildo, long time worked in TV in New Orleans. But she's going to be talking about the Creole legacy and the history of Creole culture here in New Orleans. So I want to welcome Dionne here tonight, and thank you so much for being here tonight. We're excited for your lecture.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This is something near and dear to my heart. So, and I'm going to be sharing the history of Creoles in the colonial period of Louisiana's history. So I'm going to be talking about how this all got started, and I'm hoping that you guys will maybe pepper me with some questions at the end of my lecture, so that I can know if I came across okay, and maybe answer some of the questions you have about Creoles. And for me, the best way to get started on this topic is to talk about the word Creole itself. The word is, oh, I forgot to go to that page. So what is a Creole? Now that's a complicated question because so many things are called Creole. We have Creole food, we have Creole music, we have Creole art, we have Creole people. So what does this word actually mean? Well, the origin of the word, you've got lots of things you can say about it. People will have lots of questions. Uh, you can see it's been commodified. So that's the reason why the the definition of Creole is kind of hard to explain unless you go all the way back to the very beginning. And that's where we're going to go today. The origin of the word Creole actually started in the 15th century. And that was through not the Spanish, but the Portuguese. When they had their settlements in the continent of Africa, when they started their colonies there, they wanted to use a word to describe the young children of the enslaved who grew up on the plantations and spoke Portuguese. So they came up with the word Crioulo. Crioulo is basically from the African word creer, and creer means to breed. And so they were breeding, if you will, new slaves, and those slave children spoke Portuguese. Now, this was only in Africa. Eventually, when the New World was discovered, Criollo, Crioulo, I should say, came to the New World with with Portuguese settlements in Brazil. There, the Spanish picked up on it. So the Spanish took that word and they expanded it. It wasn't just the children of slaves who were Creole. It was anyone from any place other than the New World who had children in the New World on their plantation. So the Spanish came up with the word Criollo, Criollo. Sorry about that. I'm not good with languages, but I am good with history, I think. Um, uh, for the Spanish, they expanded on it. They said not only European children, but also food, animals that were raised there, plants that were developed there, and architecture that was started that mixed the culture that was already there, the Native American culture, along with the European culture. So suddenly, this new word came about. Eventually, the French picked up on it, and they said Creole. Creole, which eventually evolved into Creole, used the exact same thing as the Spanish. It meant anything created in the New World. Now, so with that in mind, what is Creole? Is it a bloodline? Is it lineage? What is it? Is it anything that's created here? Well, I can tell you what it's not. It is not a skin color. Everyone, everyone's children was Creole. Everyone who was born in the colony was Creole. So let's look back at the colony of Louisiana. Louisiana was founded, as you know, in 1682 by LaSalle. Robert Cavalier LaSalle settled in Canada, and he was very, very curious about France having more territory in the New World, especially a way to transport goods from Canada to Europe without having to cross the North Atlantic, especially at winter, right? So he wanted to find another route. And after talking to the Native Americans, he realized that there was a river that pretty much went all the way through the continent. And so when he got to the mouth of the river, he decided to claim all of those lands. Now, it was a long time later, because he came in 1682, in 1699, that two French Canadian brothers, who are they? That's Pierre Lemoyne and his brother Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne, better known as Iberville and Bienville. They decided when LaSalle could not get back to the colony. In fact, he made his way back to the Gulf Coast, but he was killed by his settlers while they were exploring the area. So a few years later, Pierre and Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne came into the Gulf of Mexico and started exploring the area. That was in 1699. They believed in assimilation. So they believed that natives and French people should have relations. They should have relations. And those mixed children became the original Creoles. So believe it or not, our Native Americans were the ones who provided the first true Creoles in the colony. Now, he was Bienville in 1699 after Iberville had been sent off. He started working with Louis Geschereau de Saint-Denis. He and a few other Canadians, he was born, Saint-Denis was born in Montreal. Um, they were going to do an experiment. They were going, not an experiment, but an expedition to find Spanish mines. These were legendary. People said that along the Red River, there were Spanish mines and there was gold and silver. They went, they looked, nothing there. But Louis Gécheraud de Saint-Denis did go back in 1714 and establish the very first city in what is now the state of Louisiana. Now I've been going too far ahead. Natchitoches is that city, that settlement that became the city. And it is, of course, the oldest city in the state of Louisiana. But before that, in 1699, Iberville, the older brother, see, I'm getting all confused here, and I apologize for that. Iberville, the older brother, had already established Mobile. Mobile was the first capital of the colony of Louisiana. And who were on those ships? Well, a lot of different people, a lot of people that you wouldn't maybe expect. But those people, they had relations with those Native Americans. They also had personal slaves. So we had all of those people already in the colony. Once Iberville and Bienville selected the crescent section of the Mississippi to place the city of New Orleans and thereby the port, now we had settlers coming to the Mississippi. They weren't so much in Mobile anymore. There was Mobile, but many of them came from Mobile to New Orleans. And here in the swamps, they needed help. They needed help to create the city. They needed the enslaved people to come. Now, that didn't happen for a little while. They had to set up the city with other types of labor. In other words, the criminals that had been sent over here by France and other settlers who wanted to come here who were looking for the opportunity to make lots and lots of money. But they needed, especially for the new plantations that were going to be built in this colony, that is the economy that this colony was going to have, was a plantation economy. They needed the enslaved people. Now, see, I'm going to go back up here because it was in 1718 that Bienville founded the city in the Bend. About 8 months later, in 1719, two French ships arrived carrying the human cargo that would become the enslaved people here in Louisiana. And those people came from one area of Africa, the Senegambia area of Africa. And in fact, they were all pretty much from the tribe, the Bambara tribe. That is important. That meant they all knew each other. That meant they were all related. That meant that they were now going to play a major part in the formation of the colony of Louisiana. And of course, they will become part of the Creoles, who are so, is what our topic is all about. So speaking, before I go any further with that, I need to talk to you about the Code Noir. So the Code Noir was a document that was put together by King Louis XIV. Every colony had a Code Noir, a black code. For France, their Code Noir had 55 articles. We will talk about those in a little while. But the Code Noir was specifically written to manage slavery from France. So France would make the laws, they would have to be followed here in the colony. However, in 1724, Bienville, with his needs for this colony, amended the Code Noir. So so now there were new laws that were specifically about the free people of color in the colony. There had been free people from the very beginning. I need to mention that. Let me put it this way. The ships left Africa. They stopped in Haiti. They sold enslaved people in Haiti, and free people from Haiti got on those boats, came to Louisiana. In Canada, there were free people of color. Some of them came down from Canada to Louisiana to start a new life. So we always had free people of color in the colony. In 1724, Bienville, having special needs, amended the colony, and it included some laws having to do with the free people of color. Here's a little bit of the Code Noir. 55 articles. The first 11 have to do with the fact that this is a Catholic colony. Anyone who wants to live in the colony of Louisiana must be baptized Roman Catholic. They don't have to go to church, but they do have to be baptized. That includes the enslaved people and the Native Americans, to be honest with you. That's why the church came here, was to a great extent, was to baptize the Native Americans and the enslaved people, and to make sure the Europeans were following the rules. Under the Code Noir, besides the 11 that said this is a Catholic colony, and that you have to baptize the Native Americans as well, there were 44 articles that dealt with the obligations slave owners had to their enslaved people. Yes, they needed to feed them, they needed to house them, they needed to provide them with, they need to feed them, house them, clothe them, and provide them with medical care if they needed it. So these were going to be enslaved people working on the plantation. You can imagine that there were a lot of times where they needed medical care. There were also laws regarding the crimes and punishment for those crimes, that these were specifically for the enslaved people. So, for example, if you ran away and you were caught, you would be branded. You would be branded with a fleur-de-lis on your shoulder. They would also cut your ear. Next time, same thing, other shoulder. And the punishment would get harder and harder the more you broke the law. It also specified how there were not many laws afforded to the enslaved people. They didn't have a whole lot that they could do. They could not protest, they could not bring their master to court or anything like that. The last thing was the rules for manumission. Manumission was the only way that an enslaved person could gain their freedom. So, and that was in the hands of the master or mistress. Now, I'm pointing that out. Women owned their own property in the colony of Louisiana, in any French colony. Women did not have to turn their property over to their husband when they got married. So the master or the mistress would use manumission, just the granting of freedom to their slaves. That's the only way they could get their freedom. Now, what did the free people of color do in the colony of Louisiana? Because we're now going to talk about the free people of color. We talked about the enslaved people. Well, what did the free people of color do? Many of the first settlers, as I said, were free people of color from other colonies. The first free people of color in the official documents was a man who took a white man to court in 1722. I'm sorry, that's the second one. He was a free man in color. I'm sorry. I'm losing my place here. If you don't mind, I'm just going to move something over a little bit if I can. Yes, I can move it to get it out of my vision. Yeah. In a court case in 1722. In 1724, a free man of color took a white man to court. In 1725, the first free people of color got married in the colony. And then the first executioner, believe it or not, a free person of color, they had some pretty important jobs. And in 1725, I'm sorry, and then in the colony of Louisiana, a free man of color by the name of Louis Congo was made executioner. Oh, an awful job. An executioner for the colony. But there was a benefit to having a job as a free person of color. Another Congo, Jean Congo, was listed as a toll collector and keeper of the high road. That was in 1726. Now, that was a very, very important job. Free people of color also had unarmed militias. They did work to help the soldiers or the city, and that gave them esteem. All of these people used this, what they did, the executioner, the high road tax toll collector, and the militiamen did that because it made them a part of the community, and that gave them some status, and they felt that they were that the Caucasian community, the Europeans, felt like they could trust them. So that was important. You can make some money as a free person of color. So that trust was extremely important. So just because free people of color were held in esteem at time, uh, that doesn't mean that color didn't mean anything. Color did mean anything. Now, race was not a thing at this period in the 16th century. I'm sorry, in the 18th century. It wasn't until the 19th century that race became a thing, but color was a thing. And um, the the uh, government of the colony of Louisiana had lots of names for and the people of the city had lots of names for the different degrees of African blood you had in your heritage. We all know mulatto, half and half, Griff, mulatto and Native American, quadroon, quarter black, three quarters white, octoroon, 1/8 black, 7/8 white, Sambo, mulatto and black, mestiz, white, and quadroon or octoroon, and then yellow, which was almost white. It's rather insulting, but it was a fact of life. So all three of the ladies you see here are Creoles. It didn't matter the color of your skin, but skin did play a role in society, skin color. Now, runaway slaves, I told you about how if you were captured, how you would be marked as a runaway slave. However, if you ran away and you were able to survive, uh, most of the time that was because you got help from Native Americans. And a runaway slave was called a maroon. So what popped up around the city of New Orleans throughout the colony? Maroon colonies, maroon encampments. So maroons were places where Native American runaways, I'm sorry, not Native American runaways, where Native Americans welcomed the runaways from the plantations. And they were all over the place. And again, a mixing of the African and natives brought even more people, mixed race people of color. And that's where we're going with this. You know, the bottom line is that at the end of our presentations, the number of lectures we're going to be doing, you will see how we went from slavery to free people of color to Creoles of color, which became what most people think about. So now, at this point, I need to take you, we've got the plantations going, the colony is going strong. Suddenly, in 1754, we have the French and Indian War. This is the beginning of the end of the Louisiana French part of half of the colony. So this is going to be a break of the colony of Louisiana. And this is important. A lot of other things come out of this that affect Creoles in Louisiana. So in 1754, the war between the British Empire and the French over control of what was known as the Forks of the Ohio, which is at present day Pittsburgh, would bring changes to both France and Spain. It would also bring a new group of Creoles to the colony of Louisiana. It's called the Le Grand Dérangement. So during the French and Indian War, there was a French colony that had been taken over in 1714 during the War of the Spanish Succession. It had been taken over by the British. So we have these French colonists in British America. When the French and Indian War started out, some of them went to fight with the French against the British. That was a no-no for the British. So the British required these French citizens to sign an oath of allegiance to the British colony. Well, A whole bunch of them said, no, we're not going to do that. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves. So far, Britain has left us alone. Now we might have to fight our fellow countrymen. We don't want to do that. So they decided to not sign the oath. 11,000 of them in total were expelled. Between 1764 and 1785, up to 3,000 of them made their way to Louisiana, and they continued to come after that. So that happened during the war. However, it was after the war of the French and Indian War and the end of the 7 Years' War in Europe, which took place at the same time. The 7 Years' War was started because of the French and Indian War. With the signing of the Treaty of Fontainebleau that ended the 7 Years' War in Europe, Spain got everything of Louisiana west of the Mississippi, while Britain got everything east of the Mississippi except the city of New Orleans. That became Spanish as well. Why did the Spanish get the western part of Louisiana? Because they had made a secret deal in 1763. I'm sorry, in 1763. Nope, before the end of the 7 Years' War. I'm getting so confused. I'm so sorry. In 1761, they signed a secret deal. 1762, they signed a secret deal with Spain that when the war was over, Spain would get the rest of Louisiana. Why did they do that? Because they didn't want the British to get the port of New Orleans. They wanted to keep that away from the British. And that's this way, Britain only got half of the colony. That was important as well. Now we became Spanish. And the Spanish brought some interesting things with them. For example, they brought las deita partidas. That is a comprehensive legal code that was put together by King Alfonso the Wise in the 13th century. And he saw himself as a leader of a lot of different people. So he was a little more liberal-minded than many of the Europeans of the time. And one of the things he brought with him was the law they called cotación. Cotación was a law that specified that free people of color could use their time to sell things in society, in markets. They could act as nurses. They could have jobs. They could make money. And with that money, the law specified that a master or mistress had to, they were obliged to accept a self-purchase petition and allow them to purchase their own freedom. This was wonderful for the enslaved people and the free people of color, who were also in many cases enslaved, because this meant that they could, without asking or being granted permission by their master or mistress, they could purchase their own freedom. And almost 15,000 enslaved people found their freedom. Do you know what that means to the people of New Orleans and the rest of the colony? All of the free people who were already free, now they've got so many more free people. And through this law, they could purchase enslaved people, use cotación to free them, and free even more people. This was the most remarkable achievement during the Spanish period. And the Spanish were notably one of the more kind owners of slaves in the New World. I know it doesn't always seem that way, but compared to the others, they were the most kind. Now, right after we become Spanish, not long after we become Spanish in the 1760s, um, uh, there's some rumblings of problems in the British colony. And the American Revolution begins the beginnings of the American Revolution begin to cause ripples in the world, because the American Revolution showed that you could fight the monarchy and get away from them and have a free country. So this was a game changer throughout the colonial world. Um, Also, it just so happens that right after the American Revolution started in 1776, we got a new governor here in Louisiana, in the colony of Louisiana, the Spanish governor by the name of Bernardo de Galvez. 2 months after he took office, King Carlos III said, I want you to help the British, help the Americans, I'm sorry, the American revolutionaries defeat the British and become free, thus starting Galvez's Gulf Coast campaign. What kind of campaign was this? Well, he decided he used the Mississippi. He used his power with the Mississippi of control of the Mississippi to deny the British access up the Mississippi. Then he took a force, not just his Spanish army, but French soldiers, Germans who were here, free people of color, Native Americans, enslaved people, all came together to fight the British. They weren't even in the war, but they wanted to help the Americans. And they went to Mobile and they fought the British at Mobile and they defeated the British at Mobile they went up to Baton Rouge first. They went up to Baton Rouge and they defeated the British at Baton Rouge in just 2 hours because the British were not expecting the Spanish to attack them. Then they went to Mobile and they defeated the British at Mobile in a couple of weeks. Then they went to Pensacola, much bigger port, and they took on the British there and they defeated the British at Pensacola. Bernardo de Galvez was incredibly impressed by the free people of color militias who, under the Spanish, were able to carry guns. They had arms. And he found that they fought valiantly against the British. And he wanted to free the free people the enslaved people who fought with him because they also fought bravely. But he could not do that at the time. Some of them he did grant some favors. He did do some good things. And the free people of color, he did find a way to actually pay them for some of them for their work. But freedom, that was not in his wheel well at the time. Now, about 4 years after Bernardo de Galvez left the governorship, he went, by the way, from Louisiana, he went to Mexico and became the Viscount of Mexico. So he went on to some good things. But 4 years after he left, then we got a new governor, Governor Don Esteban Miro. You've seen his name in the city. And in 1786, he listened to some Spanish women who said, we're tired of seeing these free women of color walking around and flirting with the soldiers in the city, so we want you to do something. So he decided to put together the Tenon Law. This prohibited women of color from displaying excessive attention to dress. In other words, dressing really nice in the streets of New Orleans. Women had to wear a scarf. The scarf or handkerchief over their head signified that they belonged to the slave caste. So the idea was that these lovely light-skinned women had to show that they were really in the slave caste, and these men should not be hanging around with them, if you will. But these women, they took that Tenon and they turned it into a fashion statement. They embellished it, they made it beautiful, and now more men were attracted to them because they had this beautiful headdress that complemented the other clothes that they were wearing. It really backfired on them, and it was an act of defiance by the women. I think a pretty good act of defiance for to show that women weren't going to be meek about this. Now, just a few years later, around the same time actually, the French Revolution, the American Revolution uh, inspires the French to do the same thing in France. France was getting tired of how the French royalty were lording everything over them, how they were living in fine, a fine way. They were eating what they wanted to eat. They ate fine food. We know what Marie Antoinette said. And so the French Revolution starts. They say, we can do like the Americans. We can rid ourselves of our overseers, of our monarch. In fact, we will destroy the monarchy. So they ended the monarchy in France. They also ended slavery, but they didn't end it for long. um, uh, the war ended in basically uh, slavery ended, but when he became the emperor, he brought slavery back to France. Uh, want to mention that even though slavery was outlawed in France, it wasn't outlawed in the colonies. So Louisiana still, well, Louisiana wasn't French, but Haiti and all the other French colonies still had slavery. It was only in France. Um, and in and Napoleon brought slavery back to France, as I say right there on the screen. Now, the French Revolution, that inspired the Haitian Revolution. So early in the 1700s, there were conflicts going on in the colony of Saint-Domingue. That's the French name for it. It was influenced by the French Revolution, and it was exacerbated by the local government, who were very, very harsh with the enslaved people. So in August of 1791, a full-fledged revolution took place. That was on 17, I'm sorry, that didn't end until 1804. And that's when the island decided to name itself after what the Native Americans had called it, which is Haiti. I don't think I'm going to be telling you anything you don't know, but during that war, so many free people of color and French people, so the French and the free people of color ran away from the war. They were the ones who were being attacked. And so many of them left. Some of them went to Cuba and settled. Some of them went to Jamaica and settled. A lot of them came to Louisiana. And over the many years between when the war started in 1791 and when it ended in 1804, a lot of the free people of color and free Europeans came to Louisiana. And then close to the end of the war, the Haitian refugees that had settled in Cuba were being kicked out by the Spanish government because they were afraid they were going to start a revolution. And the free people of color in Jamaica, which was run by the British, they got kicked out for the exact same reason. Those two groups came to Louisiana. So Louisiana's Creoles come from all over. And Creoles themselves are actually a global community. I hope, I hope, I hope that you understand that. Now, in the United States, during the colonial period, Creole referred to everyone who lived here. So the Americans never saw color as being a part of the word Creole. They saw it as being everyone who was here. And by the way, every colony of the French all over the world, all of those people who were born in those colonies, whether it's Vietnam or Africa or in the Caribbean, all of them are Creoles. And that's pretty much the end of my story. Harold next week will be picking up the story to let you know what happened during the American period.
Perfect. Thank you, Dionne. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I have a couple. I actually have a bunch, but then I'm whittled down what my good ones I think
Okay.
are. John Hopper says, "Congrats, Dionne. I know you had been working on this for a long time. Yes, this is it's going to be even to be able to complete it next week will be even better." Has there anybody ever done when you were doing you had the chart of all the octagon, almost white? I mean, it was, and that's amazing that it that went that far down and almost white. I think what you reiterated was always that no matter what, you were still like the highest part of the slave class, even if you were not
Right.
completely white. That, I mean, you mentioned that multiple times. My question was, has anybody ever done any research related to the percentages of the breakdown. Um,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
The percentages of the breakdown. I don't think anyone has ever researched it to part of the reason is because uh the people who the people it was something that was set out in public. Okay, so it was a social thing. You would also find it in censuses, and in the
Right.
census the census takers would basically just look at the person and determine
Oh,
what they
okay.
thought they were. So to they never did a scientific way of breaking down the skin color
Yeah.
rule or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, there it was.
There was?
Yeah, you went by it like 2 slides, like 3 slides ago.
Oh, I missed it.
So,
I went too far. There it
there
is.
it is. Yeah.
I knew I could find it.
I mean, it's just that they're so want to define it so much, but at the same time don't actually want to record what is actually accurate. That is, I find that interesting of them, of people who well, this would have been the Spanish, that they're so attention to detail, but this part, some guy could just make oh, you look this, and then I find
And there,
that unusual.
yeah, and some women, some of the girls were so fair skinned. If they didn't put a teen on, nobody would know anyway. It would be
Oh,
easy to pass. Yeah.
and speaking of Tignon, so uh, I do find that fascinating that the Spanish governor came in and was like, "Yeah, well, it's just easy. Let's just put these Tignons on them." But that has to be influenced by somewhere, that he didn't just come up that on his own. I mean, is there any anything about the
My
Tignon and where that came from?
well, the Tinon was a sophisticated or was the embellishment that the enslaved people wore. What he was asking for was for them to just wear a handkerchief on their head like the enslaved people did. So
Right,
the enslaved people would make like a little uh, oh, what am I looking for? It either they just tie the handkerchief on their head or they'd have like a turban that they would wear
right,
on their head to protect them from the sun. Uh, in this case, the whole purpose of the tinon was to hide the fact that some of these women had more European hair, and so they could tie a handkerchief on their hair, but since they were free, they could also embellish it as much as they want. So the tinon became that more fancy headdress that the enslaved people were not going to be able to wear, but they certainly could because they could buy the fancy material and wrap it any way they wanted.
and Dee says she wonders if it was based on West African fashion.
I'm
Um,
sure the West Africans
yeah,
did wear more turbans and yeah, and head wrappings. I'm
and
sure that that was
definitely,
part of it.
definitely, Spain had colonies in Africa early on and stuff like that. So yeah, the Gile, she says Gele. I'm sorry, might be mispronouncing it. Let me see what else I have here. Oh, when you were talking about the slave trade and how they would bring the enslaved people to Haiti, unload some, and then fill the rest of the seats up on there and with I'm guessing you said with free people of color, but were there also
But
whites as well?
yes, anybody who wanted to come to the new colony. The only reason I brought up free people of color because I wanted to make sure that people understood that Haitians were coming to Louisiana from the very beginning, and it was for the same reason that the Caucasians would come, and that was for a new life and maybe starting out and starting a business. There were, you know, the colony of Saint Domingue was on this tiny island, most of which were plantations. So being able to start a new business would have been a little more difficult on that island. Whereas if you come to the New World, if you come, I'm sorry, to the new colony of Louisiana, then you have more of an opportunity to get a foothold early in the city or any of the cities that we're going to be developing.
I think that'll wrap us up for tonight.
That's
Dion, I wanted that was so fantastic. Thank you so much, and thank you for those great answers to those questions. Because let's see, Lynn says I inherited cabinet card photos of my ancestors from New Orleans, and one of them is wearing the Tignon. How long did this last, or did it become a way of life? I would love to share these photos with you.
Oh, I think it continued. I think it was a way for free people. Well, even after we became American, I think it was a fashion statement, and so we had a lot of American women as well as French women in town who were dressing very fancy, but we also had these free women of color. And since I'm going to give a kind of a tease about the 19th century, but during that period, the free women of color oftentimes had more money than the new white settler young men that were coming into town. And so this was a way that they were attracted. The young men were attracted to these women who had the money that they wanted to start businesses. So the relationship started because they could identify these free women of color who couldn't marry them, but they could have a relationship, even if it was just a financial a relationship.
Yeah, and that plays into another form of opportunity that you were talking about with these whites that were coming from Haiti and stuff like that, and
Yes.
in the old world. So that's a fascinating, great question. And if you email me, I can put you in touch with. We
Yeah,
can
I'd be
share those
very
photos.
interested
Yeah.
in seeing the photos that she has. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap us up for tonight. I want to thank you so much, Dionne, so much for this lecture. And we're going to have Harold Marchand next Tuesday. If you are received this email, you are signed up for next week's lecture. So you don't have to do anything. You don't have to re-sign up or make sure you, because there's a big difference between the two. You do not have to sign up. I'm going to send both. I'll send it. The preview and the post for next week as well. So you are signed up. So if you're watching later on, thank you so much for being here. And again, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. And we appreciate you supporting the Friends of the Cabildo.